All right. Good rainy evening, afternoon to everyone. It is 4 p.m. and I call to order the ad hoc committee meeting of the Board of Trustees. This committee was formed to review the proposed administrative rule BBAA-R for board policy BBAA, board member authority and responsibilities. The district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. Do I hear a motion to open the ad hoc committee meeting?
I so move that we open the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All opposed, or all in favor, I'm sorry?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we are going to discuss new business of the proposed administrative rule. I will go ahead and read to you for the record what the, let's see here. The origin of this dates back to our August 17th board meeting, in which the first reading of policy BBAA-R, board member authority and responsibilities, was presented to the board by the district for review. The administrative consideration was given for the model policy, and at that time it was referred to committee for review. And so that is thus the creation of our ad hoc committee meeting today. And so I guess from you, Dr. Little, and from the staff, if there are any considerations that we need to give to the current authority and responsibilities of the administrative rule, any background would be helpful, those kind of things.
I'm going to actually turn it over. Ms. Halliday has a little bit of background, or sorry, Ms. Catherine has that, has some background in regards to that.
Thank you, committee members, Dr. Little. Yes, we have had a policy, BBAA. You can see that it was updated last in 2017, but we have not had an administrative rule. We reached out to the South Carolina School Boards Association. They gave us their model administrative rule. You can see that here. Before Ms. Hill left, she actually worked with the chair to do some red line changes for your review, and you will see those as well in here for your consideration. And so I just give this to you for your consideration.
Thank you. Board or committee, any questions? So as we have kind of gone through some of these changes with our committee reviews and those kind of things, one of the things that came to mind was, as we look at the administrative rule, we see that this bleeds over a lot into more or less board behavior in the way that we conduct business, and that's what I mean by behavior. The way in which the processes we have in place to request for items on the agenda, or to get any legal opinions, to how we even handle communication with the community at large. And so as I've gone through and sort of reviewed these things, I did have a little bit of a question or concern that as we do this, if we're limited to this administrative rule, my fear is that because we have so much bleed over into essentially all of the B policies that exist within our board manual, I'm not so certain that we're not going to have some issues with sometimes they may run counterintuitive to each other. There may need to be some language that is updated. As you kind of flip through, and there's a binder provided for you, if you flip through, you'll see that some of these have been updated, 2017. There are some that still exist from 1985 that haven't had update. And so obviously, things have changed just with regard to the size of our district over the course of from 1985 till now, and even from 2017 up until now, we have seen, some tremendous change just in the way in which we do our business as a board. And so one of the considerations that I would pose to this committee is, do we need to look at the potential of taking this and referring back to the board as at large to request that our scope be opened? Okay, so the scope open up to essentially take the 42 policies that you see before you, and to begin to go through those in more of an aggregate, I guess, is a good way to put it, and begin to bring those back to the board as a whole, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a lot of model policies that exist for most, that do have updates. Is that correct, from, that are available to us?
Yes, sir. We can share the ones that we have updates. We did go through a large update in around 2016-17, so we have a lot of updates from then. And we've also been working the School Boards Association, Ms. Halliday, and our staff recently to try to look through to see what we don't have updated that we can share with the board as well,
Gotcha, okay.
so we can know what we're dealing with.
Right, right. And so I guess my first question would be to you, Dr. Little, in terms of, obviously, the scope of this would change significantly. So obviously, we would want to minimize any impact we can to staff at large and just the busy time that we can find ourselves. I would probably project this would be a 6-month to, potentially a 6-month endeavor, where we would partition this into multiple subgroups to begin to update to model policies with obviously any additions, deletions, corrections that the board would have. So I guess my first question would be to you, Dr. Lowell. Where are we, is that even feasible?
Yeah, I think it is. We have a number of board policies, as Ms. McPhail talked about, that have been updated. Obviously, during COVID, that has slowed down quite a bit. And I think revisiting, especially board policies that feel like they are just dated based upon, just looking at the last time they were revised.
Sure.
I think that's an important element. I think what you want to think about is how, to me, I think your bigger issue, so if you say 42 policies, that you may want to consider, here are the ones we really want to look at, and then kind of capture the ripple effect from those. Say, okay, so if we do this, then it changes over here. So if we do something in BBAA, that changes something in BDBD or something like that.
Right.
And then you try to grab the ripple effect. And then what I would begin to do is I would begin to roll out the policies for the board's consideration so that they're getting, say, 2 or 3 policies at a time, so that you're not looking at the board and saying, all right,
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
first reading,
Right,
and
right.
then, we're in, we're at 11:30, we're still going over the first readings
Right.
of these particular policies. So I think the bigger question for you is how do you want to begin to roll it out to the board so it can be digestible? Because you're not going to change 42 policies.
No.
But what I'm saying is you're going, but there may be, I'll make a number up. There could be 15 policies in here that you really want to take a look at. So a third, let's say a third of these policies end up needing to be altered in some way. And even if it's just a tweak, a will versus a shall, or a whatever it is. Yeah, I just think that the big thing is how do you want to make it digestible to your board because they then, remember how we look at them, is we look at them in a first reading. What the board has told us about policy revision is that they like a preview, like a pre-first reading. They like a first reading and then a second reading. So it's almost, in practice, it's almost 3 readings of the policy. So you got to kind of think of it that way. So when they start rolling in, you could have 4 or 5 policies come in, and it's in the system, and then you're going to have another 4 or 5 policies, or however that works, and then another whatever it is. So again, I'm going to repeat myself for the 3rd time, but I think one of the bigger issues that you'll find is how do you roll it out to your board so that they can look at the policies and acknowledge the work that's been done, and then ask questions.
Sure.
Because my guess is you may have board members that then, eventually ask questions or provide feedback that you may want to then change again. So there's some, I think we gotta leave room for that practice is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Committee?
I like the idea, I like the idea of looking at it as a whole, but doing it in segments, because we know how long our meetings go with all of the information we have to talk through and stuff. So I think that if we sat down and went through 42 at one time, that would be a lot.
Right.
So I did a quick little tally, and there are 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There are 19 of them that were 1995 or older. And so, I mean, we're talking, some of them are 35 plus years older. So, maybe we could look at those first. And then, I mean, the ones that were passed in 2019, I mean, that's probably pretty fresh with the board. But I mean, we can still look at it. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to lock ourselves into a timeline because,
Right.
I mean, I heard you say 6 months. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking maybe a year.
It could be.
possibly. So we just kind of take a bite at a time and do it really well and in depth instead of trying to consume so much at once.
Right. Yeah, I think the important part is for us to ensure really 2 kind of things here. One would be obviously the external consistency with state law, really just what are the duties that are specified to us as a school board. So we want to obviously ensure the external consistency, but kind of to your point is the internal consistency that exists, that, this, even as you read through the administrative rule and you look through some of these other policies, you quickly find yourself running a rabbit hole of, it's like, well, if we go back to this policy, then we may notice that it may seemingly have some inconsistency there. And so how do we tighten that up? And obviously we even kind of ran into that with our last committee, in that there were some internal consistencies that we ran across that we have later said, okay, we need to put this kind of on the docket to be reviewed. And so, yeah, I certainly agree. I think, not limiting ourselves to time is more important. Really sort of limiting ourselves to scope in that we're looking at B policies. And then, to your point, obviously not all 42 are going to require some revision. We do have a fair amount who have updates from 17 and up. And so luckily we have a mathematician on the committee. And so she can certainly help steer us down the ones that are more dated is a good word. Yep, dated and in need of review.
Well, because again, I mean, think about what Lexington looked like in 1985. And so that a school board, so a school board would be, thinking about things in a different context, in a different way, versus what your challenges and opportunities are today are very different. So I think it would probably be, and if I could add something probably that would help you, what I would do is start with the more dated policies. Let's get the dated policies, line them up with the model policies, and then I would just start chopping down the tree from there and just kind of start working my way through. And I would start there with those, I would start with those 19 and then just start working through and then fixing internal consistencies as you go. but I would do it side by side with the model policy. Not that you have to accept everything in the model policy, but at least what the model policy gives you is the best thinking of the best practices currently when it comes to whatever that issue is, whether it be suspension of policies or board committees or advisory committees and those kinds of things.
And I think from a manageable bite, maybe 2 to 3 policies at a time is probably about the most we would want to bring back to the board at large. And that's given the fact that those would be smaller policies. If there's one very long, expansive policy, it may have to be a standalone. So I guess my question from a logistics perspective is, at this point, do we, as the district, do we want to begin to craft together, say, a roadmap that exists of here are the ones that we recommend, or do we need to create that as the committee to then give to the district for policy review and development?
Dr. Guyton, could I add something?
Sure, please.
So the School Board Association has done a little bit of work for us. They've kind of looked at some of our policies just to kind of see what we might need to look at quickly. Not from an urgent standpoint of what they are, but just things that haven't been changed. And so they've given us kind of a list to work off of. And
Okay.
actually, like, some of the policies may even all be combined into one. So we may be taking, like, there's some policies on policy drafting that all
There's a
combine
policy
into
on
one.
policy drafting.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, so, so we might take a look at this to see where some of those are, and that might take care of some of those first. And then some of the coding has changed, so where they've drafted new model policies, our policy numbers might be different, and so they've sent us a list to kind of analyze of those. So we can look at that as well and see where we lie with those.
Okay.
So kind of what you're saying is we might have a policy that's called policy development. And instead of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different small ones for policy development, like policy development system, attorney involvement in policy development, staff involvement in policy development, community involvement in policy development, student involvement in policy development, we'll just have a policy development. Is that
Yes,
kind of what
ma'am.
you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. They've listed a lot of those policy codes, and they'll all go down to two policies. So, yeah.
Well, that's their recommendation.
That might be at least a good place to start where you feel like you've accomplished something,
Right.
if you've done that, you know?
We have to have a couple small wins before we have a big win. So yeah, I would agree. No, certainly, I think, under the advisement of the School Boards Association, as they have reviewed this as well, taking those bites as they suggest, I certainly don't have an issue with. Other questions?
It just so happens that all of those I just listed were from 1985.
There you go. There you go. And by the way, back in '85,
That was a good year, by the way.
was it?
Yeah. I know you don't remember it.
My brother he graduated high school in '86, so I get to pick on him a little bit about that. But in '85, we would have been saying, one day, and this would have been where the Food Lion is on North Lake Drive. That's where the original Walmart started. We would have said in '85, one day you'll see businesses that connect from here to the interstate. And it felt like you were driving a literal country mile when you went down 378, because it was nothing but trees. So Lexington has certainly changed since '85. All right, other issues, concerns, questions?
So today, when we walk away from here today, are we just walking away saying, hey, we're gonna recommend to the board that we don't just look at this one policy recommendation, that we look at these B policies as a whole? And do we vote on that at our next meeting?
So what I will do is I will, in the next couple minutes, request a motion that we refer back to the board at large, a request that we expand our scope to include all B policies.
Okay.
Due to the fact of the bleed over and limitations that would exist from just reviewing the administrative rules.
So we don't have to have a smaller list to give them at this time?
No,
Okay.
this would just open up our scope. It would not be limited in time. It would be limited in scope to B policies. And so we would then present those back to the board, and I think we do have to be cognizant of the fact that this has to be a running list. So if it takes us essentially 3 meetings to review these policies and to comment from the board at large and to vote, you know, very quickly 12 months will go by. And so I think we have to be prepared to bring back to the board within a reasonable amount of time in the next, 1 to 2 months, at least our first revisions or recommendations that we would make. Because it's probably going to take us anywhere from 2 to 3 months for final approval. Now, of course, we can still be working on the other ones as that's going, but it will have to be sort of a running list that occurs.
Okay.
All right. So do I hear a motion to refer back to the board at large a request to open the scope of our committee to include all B policies?
I make a motion that we request back to the board that we open the scope to include all of our B policy.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is what we will do. Dr. Little, what do you need from us at this point?
Well, I think what we'll do first is we'll start with Tracy's, Ms. Halliday's idea, and we'll get you that information, and then we got to work on it. To your point, Dr. Guyton, I do want to say that this committee will have to pick its feet up pretty good and get moving, because of just anytime you go back to the board for something, it's 2 weeks from now. It's not going to be, the day after tomorrow.
Right.
On this kind of stuff. So we got to make sure that every time we come around to a board meeting, that we've accomplished what you want to accomplish for that month, because then we'll have and then we get feedback, and then we start working on the next thing. So we'll start giving you the school board model policies and the different collapsing that we'll do, and it may make that 19 seem a lot easier if we're turning 6 into 2, or it's actually probably 7. Because then there's a policy adoption there. So I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's really 7 policies there that you may be collapsing into a couple. May want to start there, actually, would be the easiest one, and then move to the BBAAR. And I'd kind of go like that. But we'll get you the information first. I would just be prepared as soon as we get the go-ahead on the 19th. I mean, I'm assuming that nobody's ever sad that other people want to volunteer and take a look at the policy manual. So I assume that will be approved. But if you get the go-ahead from the board, then you need to move immediately, because what you want to then do is in your November, you want to make sure you're showing board members some pretty good drafts in November for a first read.
Right, and I know this is a long way away, but time flies, we know that. And I just thought about this because we made a comment about maybe not setting a time frame for when we'll be done. But some of us board members, our election cycle would be 13 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we may want to set a goal to have this completed by like next October.
Sure.
And
So
maybe even August and September. You really want to make sure your last policies are going before the board in August and September, so
Yeah.
everybody can vote in October.
So that the 3 of us stick to it.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yep, it sure
Yeah,
does.
so I think we probably need to set that as our goal.
And as far as timing of the meeting, is everybody okay with, a sort of 8 to 5, business day? I think it's always important for us to make sure we're not significantly impacting the staff.
Yeah.
We don't want this bleeding into the evening. I think they already give up enough as it is,
You okay with
So,
like a day meeting, daytime?
daytime meetings.
Yeah.
And we can certainly have some flexibility, you know, it may be lunchtime, it may be
Yeah.
right before a Tuesday meeting, something along those lines, so. All right,
That actually works better for me, so.
any other questions? Okay, well, we will set the meeting, after we have reviewed or received initial drafts. We will set the next meeting. We will plan on, it'll likely be later in this month, sometime between, our, regular monthly board meeting and, the following. So,
Okay.
do I hear a motion to adjourn?
That's a move.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you.